Just for introduction, I'm Diane Barrett. I'm in Los Angeles, California. It is Wednesday, May 4th, 2022. I'm here with Penny Rosenwasser. Did I say that correctly?
Said it beautifully.
I have, for your occupation, I have event organizer, author, and educator. Would you like to add or delete anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's, my work in the world is as a social justice activist, and some of it's paid and some of it's unpaid. So I would call that my career, but it's not a traditional, it's not a traditional career path.
So where were you born?
Washington, D.C.
What's your birth date?
January 18th, 1949.
January 18th.
I'm 73.
And how long did you live in Washington, D.C.?
I was born there, but I grew up in Northern Virginia. And then I left there to go to college, when I was 18, and then have lived different places. I mean, I went to college in Ohio, I've lived in Colorado, and then moved to California, then back in DC during the 1970s for about 10 years, and then moved to California, Oakland, 1981, 82.
Been there for a while.
A long time, yeah.
We've interviewed a lot of people from Oakland.
Oh, yeah?
Interesting.
Great community here, yeah.
That's right. And I don't think we've interviewed anyone from San Francisco yet. But certainly. Do you have siblings?
I have a brother, younger brother.
Do you have anyone in your family besides yourself who's homosexual that you know about?
You mean in my immediate family? No.
Even distant?
Well, I have I have a second cousin, one second cousin who's lesbian. And then my first cousin's grandchild is trans.
It's interesting. We're documenting that for the birth archives, Cal State Dominguez Hills. And just as a matter of curiosity, but also a matter of information.
Yeah.
So we're finding the connection is pretty vast, which I assumed, but I didn't really know. But now I have documentation. So anyway, so after you left home, did you know that that time you were lesbian, or was it something you discovered later?
Yeah, I discovered it after college. I was a ski bum for a while in Colorado, and then I came back to Washington, D.C. And I mean, I'm trying to kind of cut to the chase here because we don't have all day. But I ended up joining a political organizing collective called Source Collective. And we researched and wrote organizing manuals nationally for organizers working on housing and healthcare and daycare and women in prison. And I was given the job to research women in health. And I started reading Rita Mae Brown and Marge Piercy. And in the middle of that, I went, I wonder if this applies to me at all. Meanwhile, a woman came into the collective with her boyfriend, Jean and Peter, and we started smoking dope together. And she was a folk singer, and she sang, we would smoke dope together and then sing, sitting on her bed, sing. And she taught me about changing pronouns from he to she, which was like mind blowing.
It was ahead of her time.
Well, this was 1972, 73, 74. And she had been with women and talked about lesbianism and feminism. And pretty soon there I was in love with her. And my story that I tell is I came home to my parents. We were in DC and my parents were in Northern Virginia, and I was 24. And I came home one day and said, I'm a lesbian and I'm a communist, and you have to stop eating white bread. And
how they responded to that?
I think the lesbian was by far the most shocking.
Was it a planned introduction?
Was it planned? I don't know. I mean, I think it was a sign of my arrogance, and that they were very open Jewish liberals, but that was not anything I learned about or we had talked about. And then, of course, in retrospect, I look back and I could see my crushes from the time I was 13 that were love affairs, though not acted on in that way, but I could look back. So I'd say I came out at age 24 in that context, which was excellent because our collective, which was maybe 7 of us, maybe about half and half, women and men. And we had posters on the wall about Che Guevara and lesbians on horseback and labor struggles and Dolores Huerta, and we're playing Meg Christian on the radio. And so I came to my feminism and my lesbianism and what I now call my socialist politics all together. It was definitely intersectionality, even though we didn't have that word then.
Oh, that was a big year.
But it was a very supportive, alternative, lefty community in DC. The women were sleeping with everyone. The men were just sleeping with women, but the women were sleeping with everyone. And it was also Off Our Backs paper. You know, I worked with them. I mean, there were all kinds of, that's where Olivia Records started. We'd go to Meg's concerts. We'd go to Meg's concerts in church basements. So it was a very conducive time. For me, it was pretty easy. The coming out was pretty easy and fantastic. You know, really fun.
Really?
Very, very, very empowering and joyful.
We just interviewed Ginny Burson yesterday. Yes. And she was the manager for Meg Christian. And so
Who's that? Oh, Ginny.
Ginny, right.
Ginny's a dear friend. Oh, that's funny. We just had lunch today. Oh, that's so funny.
You'll be in the same collection now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't. Ginny's great. Yeah.
After you were out and available, so to speak, did you stay with that person?
Yeah, for a while. I mean, that was my longest relationship, actually. We were together 5 years. And a really cool thing was I ended up touring the country with Jean. We did what we called Songs of Struggle and Celebration. And Jean gave me her auto harp and taught me to play the auto harp. Really? And I was a good singer. And she taught me harmonies. And I would also play kazoo and do little theater pieces. And we toured the country, women's coffee houses, women's centers, union lines, college campuses. And it was fantastic. It was really, really fun. We did a lot of serious songs, but we also did funny songs and songs about vegetables. And it was really, I think it was very community building. And it was, you know, big lesbian audiences, but not just. So that was fantastic. So that was in my 20s. Yeah.
What's your most interesting adventure so far?
Interesting adventure of that?
Of any of your life?
Oh my God, how could I, 73 years, how could I pick one? That would be completely impossible.
What comes to your mind first?
Okay, I'll tell you one.
There you go.
I love anything having to do with the water. And I travel periodically with a group out of Santa Cruz called Blue Water Ventures, and went with Kim and the group of women to Tonga, and it was snorkeling with humpback whales.
Really, that's great.
And you go in, you have like in a boat, and only 4 of you at a time, and usually you have to swim to the whales. But this day, these young adolescent whales, boys, were swimming around us, and the captain said, "Don't worry, they will not hurt you." And I mean, these are whales; they're giant. And I'm in the water, and you're also supposed to keep 20 feet from the whale. You don't want to. And this whale starts swimming right towards me, and I'm just there and swims up underneath me and lifts me up, and I'm lying on top of the whale. And I thought I died and went to heaven. I wasn't scared at all. I mean, I just felt awe-inspired. And that happened a couple of times. That was just an amazing experience. So that's the first thing.
How did the whale experts interpret that?
I think that they were, they were playful. I mean, they like playing with dolphins. I don't think we were nearly as much fun as dolphins, but I think they were just playing with us. And
how did you come down from that? Did the whale then just? Oh,
well, then, I mean, I wouldn't know how long I was up on the whale, but then the whale swam on and let me down, but yeah, it was really great. Yeah. I've also done a lot of work in Israel and Palestine as a visible Jewish peace activist. And so going to refugee camps in Gaza and the West Bank, and This was a fantastic action that we did. I mean, I would go to the refugee camps and interview peace activists and they're fighting for Palestinian rights. And that actually ended up being my first book. But I would also, I'm sorry?
We'd like to put your book in your interview as a link, if you would like that.
That would be great. I actually have 3 books.
Yes, we'll put them all in
So
there.
if you put the website, that does have them all on there. That would be fantastic. It's pennyrosenwasser.com.
Okay.
But I also did actions with Jewish peace activists in Israel who were, again, supporting Palestinian rights. And I got a friend of mine who is head of the Israeli Jewish Women's Peace Network, who was a lesbian. The Israeli Women's Peace Network at that time was led by lesbians.
Why was that, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think as lesbians, a lot of us, not all, have a strong social justice consciousness and understand oppression and feel connected to other oppressed groups. So that's, to me, I think we have a certain boldness and courage and determination and, excitement. And there's a way we're just not fettered by male supremacy in the same way. And of course, there can be women that aren't lesbians that aren't as well, but it's easier, I think, if you don't feel like you have to have a man define you.
I agree with that.
That's a personal perspective. Yeah. So my friend Terry was head of this Jewish Women's Peace Organization activist group. And she connected me with someone who was this very bold woman, not a lesbian, white Jewish activist who was chaining herself to the olive trees to keep the Israeli soldiers from destroying the olive trees that Palestinians. She was very brave. And anyway, so I called Netta and said, Terry said, Netta's planning some action. So I called her and Netta said, meet us tomorrow at this shopping center near Jerusalem and bring your toothbrush and wear black. And that's all I knew. And I get there and there's about 12 women. I only knew Netta and maybe one other, and all wearing black. And we went to the stadium where the Jewish Olympics were happening. And I still wasn't really sure what was going to happen. But at the Jewish Olympics, then there's this, it's very patriotic. The children are marching in army uniforms and it was powerful. They played films of, Jewish martyrs and, terrible things that have happened to Jews. And then Ariel Sharon stood up, who was the prime minister, he's passed now, but he had a very brutal past and very oppressive to Palestinians. And he stood up to speak. And we all stood up in this stadium holding this big sign that said Ariel Sharon is a war criminal. And we shouted in Hebrew, war criminal. And so all the people around us are really mad at us and they're beating on us. And one of us is a Holocaust survivor. One has her arm in a sling from being beaten by Israeli soldiers. And the police drag us out of there and drag us to the police station. And we had been coached by one of us who was a lawyer who just said, don't say anything. And they took us one by one to try to get us to talk. And and I was the only one who was an American or didn't have Israeli passport. And they said, now you have a record in Israel and everything. Long story short, about 2 a.m, they let us go. And Netta and I, who had been one of the leaders, got a taxi, a service back to Jerusalem. And I said to Netta, how do you keep doing this? And you stand in front of these olive trees. Aren't you afraid? And she said, of course I'm afraid, but I won't let my fear stop me from doing the right thing. And that was a big inspiration to me. So that's when you ask about an adventure, that's another one that comes to mind. It was very important for me.
Toothbrush.
Yeah.
What did you do with your toothbrush?
We never needed it. The idea was that if we were going to spend the night in jail,
I see you'd have a toothbrush.
we would use the toothbrush. And they didn't keep us. They did let us go. So yeah. Yeah.
That would have been awful. I bet they give people toothbrushes though. It's that kind of thing that doesn't make sense.
Well, I did. I mean, I have been in jail. I guess this was another adventure. This was in 1979. I was in DC and 3 Mile Island had just melted down 2 hours north of us. in Harrisburg, Virginia, Pennsylvania. And I joined this lesbian affinity group. And we called ourselves spiderworts because spiderwort is the flower in Japan that when it's hit by radiation, it turns green. So you can, radiation you can't see, but you could see the effect of the. So we had t-shirts that said we are all spiderworts. And because of the meltdown at 3 Mile Island, there was a national movement of anti-nuclear power actions all over the country. And these different, they were called different alliances. And in the Bay Area, it was called the Potomac Alliance, not Bay Area. In the Virginia area and Washington, D.C., it was called Potomac Alliance. So there were 13 of us that were all lesbians. And there was a big action at the nuclear power plant in North Anna, Virginia, which is near Charlottesville. And we went there and our group was the first one to trespass. So we crossed the line and sat in. And the police arrested us. There were hundreds of us, but we were the first group. And also in that, as part of that collective, that's where I learned about consensus decision-making and being in a collective. And that was a huge, huge learning. Anyway, they arrest us and my friend Terry and they took us to this Southern Virginia jail cell. And we were the first two. And I remember hearing the door slam and the lock and just going, what have we done? Terry was Black, I was Jewish. We were both out lesbians in the Southern Virginia jail cell. We looked at each other going, oh my God. Wow. But it all worked out. It was soon other people were in with us and we had a lawyer. And I mean, we spent, I think, a few nights there. And we went on a hunger strike, which I was kind of bummed about because I like the bologna sandwiches, but it was my first time of putting my body on the line. And I remember when I told my mom I was going to do that, and she said, but Penny, that's illegal. And I said, but Mom, you always told us to do what was the right thing, what was right, that was what was important. And I said, this is the right thing. So I've been arrested many times since doing civil disobedience, but that was the first. And that was definitely an adventure. So. Right.
Wow. You're brave, right? You think of yourself as brave?
I don't, no, I didn't think that took that much courage because, for Terry, a lot more as a Black person. But what were they going to do to me?
You don't know. That's the problem.
You don't know. But I think often we're braver in our 20s. I have been arrested many times since, but I think often in our 20s, we have a sense of nothing is going to happen, feel less vulnerable, more invulnerable, which I think is why a lot of big movements are led by people in their 20s and younger. But I felt really strongly, and that felt like the thing with Netta. It felt really important to stick up for what was right. I always remember when I was 4 years old and something was going on and I was throwing a temper tantrum and saying, Mom, that's not fair. And she said, Penny, the world isn't fair. And I refused to accept that. So I feel like my life has been a lot about fighting for fairness and justice, and when I see something that's not fair, not anything, but I'll get certain things would capture my passion and with other people,
just look at the Roe v. Wade.
Well, I was on the streets yesterday with thousands of people at the federal building with, carrying our signs. And it was great because it was, there were thousands of us. It was very multi-generational. It was very gender, a lot more men there than used to be.
Noticed that watching it, right?
Yeah. So it was, that's heartbreaking and horrifying. And
yes.
Yeah.
But we're documenting this. This is a legacy project, and we're going through it. Just one of my interviews I did with the mask on because of COVID. So
yeah. No, that's it. Yeah.
It's all there. So, and it's not fair.
Yeah. I've had a part-time job for 30 years at the Middle East Children's Alliance. We're a nonprofit that sends humanitarian aid to children in Palestine, Iraq, and Lebanon. And so I organize our events. Those first, and so that they would pay my way there because I was doing that work. And I led 3 women's peace delegations during the 1990s to Israel, Palestine. One of them was just before the Gulf War broke out, like a month before. And not surprisingly, most of the women of the 17 were lesbians. And then when I did all those interviews with Israeli and Palestinian peace activists, and that's what became my first book, which is Voices from a Promised Land, Palestinian and Israeli peace activists speak their hearts. And then I toured the country for many months with a multimedia slideshow that I created using have a cassette tape of the interviews, and I'd ask for a boombox and play music and play the cassette tape and show the pictures of the people. And this is what they said, and went around the country selling the book, but most importantly, talking about, as a visible Jew, this is an illegal occupation. It's oppressing these Palestinians. These are all the Israelis who are opposing it. A lot of women, lesbians, showing the connection to racism in this country. So really trying to really humanize the idea of Palestinians as people, instead of, this mistaken idea, that the media would give as terrorists. And that felt really important to me to do, especially as a Jew. So that was exciting and interesting. I still meet people here who go, oh yeah, when I was in college in Boston or in Virginia, I went to your event. I mean, I can't believe they remember me. Yeah. So you never know the seeds you're planting. You never know what's going to lead to something. And that's one thing that I've learned is, that happens periodically. So that, anyway, I just wanted to share that part too.
No, one of the reasons I ask is because, as you know, this goes to universities and people get all fired up about doing something, but they have to realize, and as lesbians, more so, I think, we have to have funding. We have to work, we have to, acquire some jobs along the way. It just doesn't happen because we have an idea.
That's really important. And I feel really fortunate that certainly in my 20s, the world was different. The US was different. The economy was different. We all lived in collective houses. You could live on $400 a month. And we weren't, we live very simply. And it's definitely different now. I think I've always lived at the lower end of the scale. I grew up in a non-materialist family and very solidly middle class and had that security. And definitely, I've always had health care and was fortunate to inherit some from my parents when they passed, which is what my savings is, because I don't own one thing. Everything I own is old. I don't own a house, but my computer, my car, everything like that. But no, so I really like, especially all these issues of student debt and everything today, though it's much, much different. So I totally understand. It's a very legitimate issue you're bringing up. And I've been fortunate to, I'm actually more concerned about it now, at this stage of my life. Like, what if something happens? And thank heaven for Social Security. But anyway, yeah, but it hasn't been a major determinant for me, because my activism has been able to support that, or savings, or my work that I was doing.
No, that's the part. Aging, Social Security doesn't really give us enough.
No, but what a gift when that check comes in every month. Wow.
I know, always glad to see it, huh?
Gosh, it's really fantastic. Yeah. Not only I only learned recently that domestic workers and farm workers don't get it, which is terrible, because they're some of the main workers that keep the country going. So that was a compromise that FDR made to satisfy the Republicans to get the New Deal through. So that's terrible, but yeah.
They work very hard. We lived for a while in Santa Maria, and there was a lot of agriculture there. Mm-hmm. I said, if I was picking those strawberries, they would be at least $20 to $200 a little pint, because their backs, they're always just bent over in half all day long. So it's really difficult.
One of the groups I'm involved with now is called 1,000 Grandmothers for Future Generations. That was one of the photos I sent. And it's in the Bay Area. There's about 1,000 of us. And last May, 30 of us traveled to northern Minnesota to be in solidarity with the Indigenous women water protectors who were working to stop Line 3, which is a pipeline from Canada of tar sands oil that's going through Indigenous lands. And the Indigenous women were leading the fight to stop it. They tried very hard, but Biden refused to stop it and the governor refused to stop it. But we went up there possibly to do civil disobedience, but that didn't happen. But I got to swim in the headwaters of the Mississippi River naked, which was fantastic. We led a huge demonstration in St. Paul in front of the governor's mansion, and we'd wave this blue cloth to replicate the rivers. And we had Indigenous women speaking, and we made paper cranes that were on the gates of the mansion. And I led a lot of our songs that were like, well, one of our big chants was listen to your grandma, keep it in the ground in terms of fossil fuels. And then one of our songs was, the ancestors are rising, now is the time, protect the sacred, stop the pipeline. And here's all these women, many with gray and white hair, clearly older, but feisty and creative and active and artists and, leaders. So it's a very active group. I was just on Earth Day. We were in San Francisco being marshals for Youth Against Apocalypse, which is young people, mostly young people of color, who are fighting for climate justice. And so now they call on us. So I love this intergenerational work. Sometimes we make sandwiches for them, and we were the marshals for the march to keep them safe, or we'll be painting the murals on the street. So that's
so how do you know all this is going on? Say somebody's listening to this, and they'll say, boy, I'd like to do that. How do you get linked into that network so you know it's happening?
Yeah, well, they could Google us, 1,000 Grandmothers for Future Generations. But there's also a new group started by Bill McKibben, who was the one who started 350.org, and it's called Third Act. And you can Google that. It's a national organization for people 60 and over. The idea that a lot of folks have time and some have money, and doing stuff on voting rights and climate justice. And so that would be someone listening. If you Google Third Act, they're doing great work. My friend Akaya Winwood is one of the main consultants, so it's definitely multiracial. So that's a good question and a good place to go for that.
So how do you travel from one coast to the other? By car? Do you fly?
In my youth, in the 20s, I would go back and forth driving.
Right.
Then I was enjoying using drugs a lot more. Cocaine really helped me to stay awake for those long drives. It was really fun. I haven't done that in a long time, but I did also ended up, I think it was after the Spiderworks thing, I got involved with a women's production group called Roadwork. We put women on the road in Washington, D.C., and we booked concerts for women performers like Sweet Honey and the Rock. And I ended up booking the tours for Meg Christian, Chris Williamson, Toshi Regan, Farron, Linda Tillery, Teresa Trull and Barbara Higbee, June Millington. And then I would sometimes go on the tours with them around the country. I went with Chris Williamson to the UK, and it was a tour for a non-nuclear future. And that was really exciting to do. So that was something where the travel was covered because it was part of my work. But another big highlight, this doesn't have to do with the travel, but out of Roadwork, we created this festival called Sister Fire. And it was an urban festival. So in DC or nearby, built very multiracial, built by women, for women, women performers, and women were the production team, but it was open to everybody. And my proudest part of it was I was in California at that point, but I moved back for a year to coordinate. This was our 5th anniversary. And we had camping, we had programming for children. We had a deaf stage that was programmed by deaf women and with deaf artists. We brought Sistren, which was a Black theater troupe from Jamaica. We brought Norma Elena Gadea from Nicaragua. We had 3 different stages. It was for 2 days. We had every style of music. We had dance. We had theater. We had Tracy Chapman. We had Alice Walker with Sweet Honey in the Rock. It was a multi-level experience. And we had, thousands of people came, and we raised thousands of dollars. And I was just really proud of it. So it was really that vision. It was very feminist vision and very multiracial vision. And it was really putting forth this vision of women's leadership, but open to everyone. So it wasn't separatist. And it was also a place where it was, again, because it was a multiracial organization, I was working more than I ever had before with women of color. And so it was a deep dive into my own racism and starting to notice my internalized sense of superiority and white supremacy, and learning to take leadership from women of color. So it was painful, but it was exciting. And I formed close relationships, and then moved back after that was over to the Bay Area and got involved with a big conference in San Francisco that was a lesbian conference. It was a lesbian anti-racism conference. And this was right after the 1989 earthquake. So you weren't driving then, but you were taking the BART. And that's where I met amazing women of color, lesbian activists, Maria Barron, Papusa Molina, Lakota Hardin. I got to interview Barbara Smith, who was then in my second book. And again,
you're in a relationship now? Are you currently in a relationship?
Love relationship?
Right.
No.
So I asked that because you're so involved, intensely involved, which is great. But then what kind of partnership goes with that as far as a love relationship?
Yeah, well, there was a big one when I was back in DC doing the Sister Fire. One of the people that was organizing the Deaf Stage, one of the big loves of my life. I worked for 30 years at the Michigan Women's Music Festival, and I coordinated artist hospitality and co-coordinated that, and a lot of great romantic adventures there. And that was very powerful, because we were really trying to create the world that we wanted, the way we wanted the world to be. And it was very intergenerational. And I got to lead a big workshop there for the staff on anti-Semitism. And we did a lot of racial justice work there. And so it was high drama. And it was also, an example of women can do anything. So something needed to happen. You figured out how to do it, and people helped you. And that helped me with that attitude of, that I could try to do anything.
So what's your next adventure now that you've had all these? Do you have a focus, or are you just available?
I'm totally consumed with worry about the future of democracy in this country. So I feel like working on voting rights is really paramount. When Trump was running, I didn't think he was going to be elected, but I was afraid he would. So I went to Miami for a week, and with my friend, we canvassed throughout Miami for Hillary. We weren't crazy about Hillary, but we really didn't want Trump to get in. And so I hope to do that. I did that for Obama in Colorado. I hope to do that for the midterms. I'll see which state, maybe Wisconsin, maybe Pennsylvania. They need help to do that. And then for the last election, because it wasn't safe to travel, I did a ton of phone banking. So I'm going to be starting to do that. So I feel like working on that, and climate justice and anti-racism work. I do help lead racial justice work in my synagogue, which has about 1,000 people. And we're really working to decenter whiteness and uproot white supremacy. I co-lead our white affinity group. And so I do a lot of that, and that's not paid. That's my activist unpaid. But I get to work with a lot of great Jews of color and build those relationships, and that's exciting and fun, and enriches my life. So
were your parents involved in the Holocaust?
No, they my grandparents came over before that. So I found out that there are some distant family members that we've lost, but I'm lucky about that. But a lot of the work I do, like my book, Hope into Practice, Jewish Women Choosing Justice Despite Our Fears, it's a lot about, it came from my PhD work. And it's about uprooting internalized anti-Semitism because of how that can get in our way of having big lives. And I also believe the better we feel, the more we can get rid of those messages in our heads that tell us there's something wrong with who we are, then we feel better about ourselves, we treat other people better, and our activism for justice is much more effective. So that's a lot what that book is about. And it connects to understanding the intergenerational trauma that a lot of Jews have from the Holocaust, and even before that, the pogroms in Europe, which were riots that would rape women and kill people and take away our property. And, you know, different groups have had a lot of trauma in their backgrounds, especially Native Americans, Black folks, women in terms of the witch hunts and things like that. And that comes up for us today. So I'm actually a big advocate of healing, that as we do our activism, we need to find healing modalities and we need to involve our bodies, because I think a lot of grief and terror and trauma is stored in our bodies. And if we don't work through it and heal it, it comes out in ways that are not helpful. There's a great book called My Grandmother's Hands about, it's written by a Black therapist and healer, Resmaa Menakem, about healing our bodies and connecting that to both racial justice. And so I think those things are very intertwined. So I know it's a big answer to your question.
So are you, you're an excellent speaker. Do you speak a lot publicly?
I do. I mean, I speak, I would actually like to be doing it more. You know, I lost gigs during COVID and things like that. Speak a lot about anti-Semitism and internalized anti-Semitism and healing, the things I've been talking about here, about racial justice. I used, you know, in the past, like I would talk about the anti-nuclear power stuff, or I worked with women in AIDS. I would talk about that. You know, it depends what I'm kind of working on. But I enjoy doing it. It's, you know, it's fun. It takes work. It takes preparation. And I also lead this group once a year called When I Dare to Be Powerful. It's taken the quote from Audre Lorde about, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. And so the workshops are experiential, and they're for young Jewish activists to help empower their leadership for racial justice, for, you know, and a lot of them are queer, for a better world. So a more just and generous world. Yeah.
So if you knew that you were going to, your life was going to end soon, what would you like to be remembered for?
No, I think about that because I'm at the age where I have a lot of friends really ill, which is, God, it's hard. You know, I think just someone who was open-hearted and compassionate and cared about people and really cared about creating a better world. And fought hard for racial justice, for Palestinian rights, for women, for queer folks. That I think it's also really important to have fun and have adventures and find what nourishes us. That's really important, whether it's, for me, it's nature a lot, being in the water, but whatever it is, to build that in and have full, rich lives and build community. I haven't had a partner in a long time. I'm always looking. And I've done some online dating, but that hasn't worked that well for me so far. But
how about your availability?
I'm available, absolutely. But I have a very close community, very intergenerational close community, dear, dear friends that I love and value and who love and value me. And that's what's gotten me through COVID for sure, because I live alone with my 2 kitties. So yeah. So yeah, I guess that's what to be remembered for. That's a good question. Yeah. Embracing life, you know. Yeah.
In closing, what would you like to ask me? Do you have any questions about what we're doing, what we're trying to do?
No, I'm glad that you're, like I said, I think I'm glad that you're documenting these stories and they'll be archived. I think that's really important. That's why I actually had really strongly encouraged Ginny to write her book, Olivia on the Record, because felt like the women's music experience hadn't been documented enough. And I think it's really crucial in really building feminism and women's empowerment in this country. And I was really proud to be part of it too. Jewish Voice for Peace is an organization that I helped build that's now a national thriving nonprofit that's working a lot for Palestinian rights. And I helped create the infrastructure and was on the founding board and organize a lot of events and recruited the advisory board. And a lot of us who started it were lesbians. It was, and it's big, very big now nationally, and a lot of it is queer led. So that's just another thing that I'm really proud to have been a part of.
Your interview is very compelling, and I would anticipate that as people see it, they'll want to know how to connect with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Diane. Yeah, I mean, the website has different parts of this, and also resources and how to contact me. Yeah, just, I guess with younger folks, we worked hard to leave you a better world, and I'm sorry things are out they are now, but don't give up hope. Keep going, keep believing in yourselves, follow your gut, be as open-hearted and listen. I think active listening is really valuable to hear. People want to be heard and listened to. So again, great that you're doing this to give us a chance to share and people to listen to that. And I think intergenerational work is really important because I think those of us who are older have a lot of experience that we can offer and wisdom, and younger folks have a lot of courage and fresh thinking. The world is different than it was. And so I think that combination, it can be really powerful. I learned that from one of my mentors, Melanie K. Kantrowitz of blessed memory. And I encourage anyone to read Melanie's work because she's done some profound writing as well. So, and anything by Audre Lorde, very profound writer, and June Jordan, and yeah. So anyway, thank you, Diane.
Thank you. I'm honored that you spent your time with us.
Oh, well, I was honored to be asked, and thanks for all the follow-up and for doing this.